So, to understand this story better, you would have to go to the part one. This is the part two of the story or the history, that pertains about the indigenous community and what have you done and what achievements have these people have done, etc. And all those things that I have explained in the part one. Well, it would be much better that you would go to the part one if you would like to understand the narrative even better. So, as I was saying, so I saw the news of what happened to Guatú Santana, which is somebody, like I said in part one, that I had met a long time ago. Look, the indigenous community is so connected that you would have never imagined, right? But however, what I wanted to sorry jump into next is that I saw the news, and as I was seeing the news in the social media, me or some people and myself, some people and I were looking at the comments, and the comments were horrible. It's like what's happening to Puerto Rico. Like a whole bunch of people were looking at the news of what happened, and then there were so many comments that were lacking in sensibility, and I was like, wow, like what's wrong with you people? Like, can't you be more sensitive about this? Like, something bad happened to this young man of Puerto Rico, right? And a whole bunch of people were showing that they didn't feel bad for what happened to Guatú Santana. So I'm feeling pretty disappointed with the comment section of what happened, right? So I feel really bad with that. So I feel really sorry for Guatú Santana. If something bad happened, I would never, I wouldn't go like, oh, it's good that this happened to him. So I would never go like that in such a manner. It's like, oh man, like that really sucks. If something bad happens, I will always be like, oh, that really sucked, or like that's so bad that happened, because you wouldn't like that to be you, right? For starters. So that's one thing. The comment section was horrible, so pretty disappointed with a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans. ¿Qué pasa, pueblo? ¿Qué pasa, Puerto Rico, right? So, anyways, like I was saying, I met Guatú Santana en el Viejo San Juan, en el Morro, and he was playing guitar, and I was a musician as well. They were playing Sin Bandera, maybe Que lloro por ti, or something like that they were singing. So my friends and I were having fun in San Juan, and my friends used to sing and play music too. So we were super social, and we gathered up with his group and we started to sing. I mentioned about Imarestepa, and that, well, I mentioned a whole bunch of things in part one, so I hope you go back to part one. But anyways, like I said, mis pésames para la familia, to their family and to all their friends. And it's really sad that this happened, because like I said, Guatú is very important for two things. And I don't want to necessarily mix them. Guatú Santana is important for the indigenous community, for all the things that he has done for the indigenous community, all the things that he has worked for to influence, or rather to foment, indigenous culture in the island of Puerto Rico. And that's one thing that I don't want to necessarily mix. Like, he's important because anybody would be important if they would foment or promote the indigenous culture of my island, which I love, which he loved. So that being said, we are two actors in this community with different roles. Like I always say, I love the language, and he does the things that he does, and I do the things that I do, and together we form or construct the indigenous community. Me with my interest, whether it's language and whether it's genetics, which I'm really good at because I really like it, and the historical, I'm good with all that, or whether it's Guatú Santana or Martín Casiva Opil Beguilla with their leadership roles, etc. So this is how the story goes. I have nothing against Guatú Santana. He was my friend. We used to talk. But at one point, when I learned all that I wanted to, not all that I wanted to learn, I was trying to learn at the time, but Guatú Santana was a little bit hesitant, and that's why I said that I don't have nothing against Guatú Santana. He helped me, but he was still a little bit hesitant. Why? Because he was having some problems with some people that wanted to, I don't know, I really don't know, I don't understand, that wanted to maybe gain from him, or I don't know, but I felt lonely at the time, especially because I loved the culture so much, and I wanted to learn indigenous Taino language of Puerto Rico, because one thing that you have to understand about the language of Puerto Rico is that it's very limited. Once I was like 19, or once I was like 18 or 17, or around the teens age, I had learned indigenous Taino language of Puerto Rico before ever meeting Guatú Santana or anybody. It's just by myself, I didn't know about nobody. It's just me loving the Taino, So what? So then it was that I met these people. First, I met him in El Morro. I don't know nothing about him. I just met somebody singing in El Morro, and then we exchanged Facebook, because if we were to go to El Viejo San Juan again and sing in groups outside while the people pass by, it's super fun. It used to be super fun. Now I wouldn't do that because, or I don't know, but at the time I was like 17 or 19 or something like that, where it was super fun to do anything at the moment. So then it was that in Facebook, it was that then I discovered that he formed a part of the indigenous community that I was researching about just recently at that moment. So, like I was saying about the indigenous language, you cannot articulate. So I knew it, but I still had a lot of doubts, because you still need to know a lot about the vocabulary. This doesn't just apply to the indigenous language of Puerto Rico. This applies to any language. You have to learn the vocabulary. It's so it's a very expanded language when you have to learn a language that you don't know. So it's so expanded like that because you have to learn such a wide variety of vocabulary. It's easier for me because I speak a Romance language. and if I would, and it's Spanish. But if I would learn Italian or Portuguese, then it would be super simple for me. It would be much more easier. So, but it's because Romance languages are so similar. So it's kind of not fair, but in the end, they are different languages. But it's easier for me to learn a Romance language because of that reason. So I had a rough time. Okay, I had a lot of help from them both, from Martin Casiba Opil and from Guatú Santana, but things were slow, but I was getting a lot of help from Martin Casiba Opil, like a lot. Like we were talking in Taino and doing a whole bunch of cool talks and conversations about indigenous things. It was super fun, like to learn a lot. But once I knew the sources, because you have to understand, I have the right to learn the language. So, but things were going so slow that I just stopped talking so much to people, and for myself, not for nobody else. So then I was trying to learn about the language, and I learned the sources that are legit, the ones that are legit. And I was like, oh, I finally found the sources, because how limited the indigenous language of Puerto Rico is. If you know the language, the original one of Puerto Rico, which is the base for Taino Boricua. So if you learn that base one, which is the original one, which includes, so instead of Mabuica, it says Tairiken. So that's the original one, where you get all of those original words. Instead of hurricane, you say Guabanse. It's very interesting stuff once you dive deep, like I have, and I have become, after all this, I did become one of the, after such a struggle, I have nothing against what was happening to these people, because they were having a whole bunch of problems with I don't know who. I just don't know. I was just a simple teenager trying to learn Taino, and eventually I was able to learn it in my own speed, because I wanted it now. I was like, man, like I'm Boricua, I should have access to this language, like right here, right now. And a whole bunch of people knew some of the secrets, and I was frustrated. I was pulling on my hairs. I was like, man, like what are these secrets that I'm supposed to know so I can speak Taino correctly? Not like. So there's a whole bunch of dialects and languages that are added upon, but nonetheless, there is a correct way to go about it. And I eventually became, like, I'm the Taino language guy. What can I say? That's the truth. Because a whole bunch of people concentrate on different things about indigenous aspects, but in particular, I concentrate in language, and I take it upon myself, like if I was doing a master's degree or of some sort. That's how the level of this investigation has become, and that level where I have even done discoveries, or I can understand aspects about indigenous language of Puerto Rico that nobody ever imagined that you could actually view it in that particular way. But that's just the truth of the matter, because if you study something and you dive deep into it, then you will get insight that not everybody receives, especially not because I have something against them, or because I want to say something something negative about their craft. It's just that this is my craft, and they have different things that makes them also indigenous, and it's also important for me. And that's the whole point, that in this aspect, some things that they did to help me are very important for me, and the things that they do to reinforce the culture and to foment it and promote it is also something that I can totally appreciate, for sure. But that's one thing. But the second thing is that why he would be so important for me, it would also correlate to why he's a, it doesn't mean that he's a bad guy, but it's also the reason why he would be an antagonist in my story. It doesn't mean that he's a bad guy. If I also have a character based in my story, in my ebook story about Indigenous Borícua, that is based upon me, and he's also a type of antagonist. He's not a perfect character. This is just how I like to do things. I in my character arc, in my development of my character, I will eventually become somebody better and more wise. And since he was my friend, then I have a story that would correlate to my indigenous story, and my indigenous story will be super important because now I am able, because all of this, the effect was that now I'm able to grant access, to a wide spectrum of people, especially Puerto Ricans, and especially people who share that Boricua ancestry and that want to speak Taino language and that want to know the history. Well, this eventually segued from this situation where I was trying to learn indigenous Taino language of Puerto Rico, but the secrets and the knowledge was given to me super slowly. I have nothing against that. It's just that was the truth, and I can't say nothing about that because I can't do nothing about that. But what I can say is that I see the good, whatever good he and whatever good everybody has done, I can at least see it and I can recognize it. And he actually helped a lot. So that's one thing. But he's very important, and not because he's important for me, but he's important from this situation. I was able to make a channel because once I learned indigenous language of Puerto Rico, I didn't stay like that. I was like, okay, I learned indigenous language of Puerto Rico. Guatú Santana doesn't want to convey the information or to provide the information as quickly as I would want to, and he probably, it's not his fault, but he probably didn't know that I wanted to learn so bad. I was so innocently trying to learn as a teenager, that then I made this channel. I was like, oh, okay. I had such a rough moment trying to learn this language when I was like 17 to the age of like 21. I had such a rough moment, to finish it, because I knew the basic one, but to finish it was so uphill. I would treasure information and all the data and all the vocabulary. I would treasure it. It was incredible, right? So I would super treasure that. And then, so that situation helped me for the future. That since I had such a hard time, I was like, okay, then I'll make a channel and I'll help people learn language of Puerto Rico. And now I have reached, or thousands of people have reached to me for multiple reasons, but especially regarding the culture and the indigenous community. But that I also teach the language of Puerto Rico, and I have already given classes about the language of Puerto Rico, which is our language as Puerto Ricans, as indigenous descendants. I'm sorry, and that's why, in that case, that's why he was so important. Because since there was a lot of situations going on at the time, I was frustrated, but I wasn't angry, but I was frustrated that I wanted to grant the accessibility to everybody like I had it at the time. So I hope you like this video that of how things turned out to be. I'm super grateful for Guatú Santana and Martin Casiba Opil. So may their souls rest in peace, because they are important for the Taino culture, for the Taino community, regardless of what was happening. Is that Guatú Santana? I don't know, like maybe some TV production or something was trying to make money out of Guatuamacu in some type of way, and I don't know if he was confusing me with some type of I have no idea, with some type of production, but I was just a kid, so I don't know, I don't know about that. So yeah, so what I can say is that he was a buddy of mine, and he was not exactly a tequina, which would be a teacher, but he helped a lot with a whole bunch of things. But a whole bunch of people from the indigenous community, especially from Guatuamacu, actually helped a lot. There was this lady called Tequina, actually. She was called Tequina. She helped a lot too. So I hope she can subscribe to my channel, because a lot of people helped, including her. And then, I'm just super grateful for everybody. And it's super cool to have them in my story, in my movies or series, but in my story, which is in Amazon. So it's pretty interesting of how things are happening. First Martin Casiba, and now Guatú Santana. So Martin Casiba Opil, this is him in real life, and this is him in my story. Well, the same thing goes for Guatú Santana. This is him in real life, and this is him in my story. I already had this for a long time. I've been trying to do this story for years. I've had all of this information prepared, so one day I would share with them, but, well,